Good morning, everyone. Thank you guys for coming back on. Missed you guys last week, but we're excited to be back here. Almost, I guess, I don't know what we'll decide, but almost at the end of Romans. We've been on a journey of Romans, and it's been a great conversation. Learning a lot, growing a lot, especially in the conversation. I think that has to do a lot with what we're facing today, right? And what it looks like to be a Christian and whatnot in today's world. So as we go into Romans 14, and before we do that, I guess, I don't know if anybody else is eating here, but I got some food. I guess I'll start. It's half eaten, but
those are crumbs, bro.
It's crumbs. Yeah, it's crumbs. You got it's a vegan cookie. Shout out to Elton and Kelly Miranda. They gave us a little anniversary gift with some cookies. So those are bomb, but they're vegan. So you can imagine they're like no gluten, no sugar, no.
So they're not a cookie.
It's a grain. It's a grain. It's a grain. And then I got some, I believe it's Filipino bread that my pastor brought me from Washington, actually. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's really sweet and it's good bread. So that's what I'm eating with some jam and some butter. And then obviously the go-to mate. But what about you guys? Anybody eating anything?
So I had a cup of coffee before coming on. I'm confessing. Usually I wait and have it, amongst company. But I was too tired this morning, so I woke up and had my quick shot of espresso. But I am eating like some almond kind of thing. I don't know what you call this, but it's pretty good. And I'm drinking a bottle of water.
All right,
that's about it.
Healthy choices.
Hey, this is one of the rare times you'll ever see me with some coffee, man.
Man. Yeah, some iced coffee.
Yeah.
All right.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, I'm not a coffee shop, so you probably hear the music in the background. So yeah, I mean, they didn't have anything else, so I had to get something. We got some oat milk in there, Had to get some oat milk in there,
Oat milk. You said it's been that kind of week, man. You need coffee at the end of the week, man. That's it.
Steven, let me ask you this: do you drink chai?
No, not regularly.
No,
I mean, my parents did growing up, but I never was like. I'm not like like cross-culture Christian,
like Kevin Wilson.
Shout out to Kevin, man.
I'm not the chai master. Nah, man. I'm just.
Yeah.
I mean, Kevin, I guess is more in tune with the culture. I grew up in America. So.
Right.
My parents were drinking growing up, but I just never.
Some Americans think that chai is from here, so I mean, it's all cool.
Yeah, I mean, right here. Yeah, no. I mean, I've had it before. I've never been a big coffee, tea drinker in general.
Right.
But maybe it's like getting older, and I'm like, oh, like when I drink coffee, it actually has like an effect. Like I actually feel like energized a lot. Whereas other people that drink coffee and it doesn't really impact them too much. So for me, I usually I'll drink a cup of coffee, whereas other people might drink 2 monsters.
Right.
So it's
they won't drink coffee, but they'll drink 2 monsters and a Red Bull. But
yeah, something like that.
That's funny, man. That's good. Well, thanks for joining us, bro. I'm hoping you're enjoying Orlando. And so we've been going through Romans. It's been, I know for me, really impacting and life changing as we've been going through this and talking with the bros as well through Bible and Brekkie. So today we're going to Romans 14. But before that, I do want to ask, I know Gabe got hit with which is very interesting because the three, Brian, Steven, and I are actually in Florida. We didn't get hit really. I don't know if you guys down there in Miami we really didn't get touched by the last hurricane or tropical storm but Gabe got hit all the way in New Jersey. I'm not laughing. It's just funny. I guess it's ironic that we live here in the coast and you get, so Gabe, what happened? How you feeling with post, what was I don't even know the name of I forgot the name of the tropical storm. Isaias,
yeah. Things are pretty much back to normal here. We had a power outage that was for 4 or 5 days, and pretty much most of I live in I guess a townhouse, and the condo association basically is not too good here. All the sump pumps run on electric, and when the power goes out, the sump pump stops pumping out the water.
Oh man.
And so because of the rain and also I want to say that the right behind my house is a creek that turns into a pretty fast river when it rains a lot. That I'm sure that had something to do with it as well, because the water level increased. But anyhow, I live in the basement of our townhouse, and yeah, we had like an inch of water all throughout. So that sucked.
Man. Yeah,
kind of displaced me in my own home for a couple days.
Yeah.
But I'm back now. We got all the water out. We ended up having to get a generator, then attach a vacuum that had a pump and pump out all the water ourselves. But when we would do that, like it would literally rain the next night, and then we had to do that all over again the next day. So yeah, it was just a few days of extra work and being uncomfortable, but everything is back to normal for the most part here. Yeah.
Did all your Andrews books get wet?
No, dude, and I was super worried about my books, probably more than anything else. Like all my electronics was like practically up here in the second floor, but my books, I was worried that maybe the humidity would cause like mold or something like that, but nothing happened. Like there's no mold. We got some inspector to come and check it out. So yeah, everything's cool. Back to normal, really.
Good. Awesome. Well, we're glad you're good, man. Like I said, it was just, I guess, I don't know if the word is ironic, but that we're in Florida in here and we didn't. I mean, we got some rain, but
I feel like the infrastructure down there is pretty much like built to sustain those kind of storms. Up here, it's just like we don't normally get hurricanes or tropical storms, so it's not. You're not really on our radar, really.
Right. Well, that's good. Well, yeah, sweet. Thanks, Gabe. I'm glad you're good. Glad the fam's good too. But yeah, jumping into Romans 14, we're just gonna jump into it. Reading from the first couple of verses and just go from there in the conversation. Again, if you're watching, you want to be a part of the conversation, comment in with any questions or observations, and we'd love to engage with you as well. So Romans 14 verses 1-9. Paul has just talked about kind of moved into in chapter 12 and on to what it looks like to live by the Spirit, to live in light of what we've been talking about, right? Righteousness by faith, not by your works, not trying to attain salvation. And so what it looks like. And so he continues in that dialogue. We talked about in chapter 13 about submission to governing authorities and how love fulfills the law, and in light and living in light of the reality that Jesus' coming is near. And so chapter 14 begins with this, verses 1-9. Accept, I don't even know how you pronounce that now. Accept the one whose faith is weak without quarreling over disputable matters. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak. Who's a vegetarian here? I guess I'm half. Steven.
This guy. This guy right here.
Oh, yeah, Steven. He just takes off. I'm going to read that again. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another whose faith is weak eats only vegetables. Man, I'm sure vegetarians have heard this argument a lot of times. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does, for God has accepted them. Who are you to judge someone else's servant? To their own master's servants stand and fall, and they will stand, for the Lord is able to make them stand. One person considers one day more sacred than another considers every day alike. Each of them should be fully convinced in their own mind. Whoever regards one day as special does so to the Lord. Whoever eats meat does so to the Lord, for they give thanks to God. And whoever abstains does so to the Lord and gives thanks to God. For none of us lives for ourselves alone, and none of us dies for ourselves alone. If we live for the Lord, and if we die for the Lord. So, whether we live or die, we belong to the Lord. For this very reason, Christ died and returned to life so that he might be the Lord of both the dead and the living. Thoughts? You want to go first, Stephen? Any thoughts on this attack? I'm just kidding. No, obviously, I think we've, there's been a lot of dialogue, in terms. Obviously, here Paul's breaking down into what you're eating, kind of what days you're keeping, and just even judging how people take care of their servants and not. And I think it's important to highlight this and contrast it with, or pit it with the context of Paul is writing to an audience that is mixed Jewish of descent and Greek, right? They're people that haven't been following the Jewish laws of, ritual, of circumcision, of what they eat, of what days and festivals they keep, of what meats are clean and unclean, of what exactly is even kosher, right? In that sense. And so Paul is trying to say, hey, at the core, I think for me, the summary statement there is in verse 7, right? 7 and 8, right? For we don't live for ourselves. And I think it's something that's going to continue throughout. But what are your thoughts, guys, on vegetarians versus meatatarians and different days? I guess it's not vegetarians, right? It's just it's more of in the context of Jews and Greeks, of this idea of weak and strong, right? Of someone that has weak faith. Any thoughts?
I mean, I guess like my initial thought early on is I feel like there is a lot of conversation within modern church, right? About issues like this, right? Whether it's veganism versus non-veganism, right? And I don't know how often we talk about it in the context Paul is talking about it here, where it's kind of referring to weak faith versus. I think that whole idea is kind of muddied. I think it's usually just like anything, just a polarization, versus what some of the underlying things are. And I'm just looking at verse you see me, verse 6 where it says the one who observes the day observes it in honor of the Lord, right? And I don't know, I think it seems I think as humans we're really fascinated with really, really having clear cut answers, right? This is the right way versus this is the wrong way.
That's a good one.
It kind of seems like Paul is leaving some room for there to be, I don't know what the right word is, nuance, or maybe an individual experience of somebody, where they are and the reasons for why they do what they do. And I think a lot of times in our normal Christian conversations, we aren't usually having that. We aren't giving that space. We aren't giving the willingness for people to kind of understand that, right? It's always this is the right thing to do, and we're all always trying to rationalize why we do what we do versus kind of seeing beyond that, seeing beyond an issue, or seeing beyond well, they eat veggie meat, so that must mean, whatever, right? Tofu, that must mean they think they're holier than everybody, whereas it could be something different, right? It could be that they are weak in how they are helping themselves stay strong, in their faith. I don't know, it's just my initial thought.
That's good.
Yeah. Just adding a little bit to that verse, right, where Seba attacked Stephen. At least the NLT reads, but another believer with a sensitive conscience will eat only vegetables, right? And so I think that believers have a certain knowledge of what is good or bad, and we all have varying levels of guilt, right? And some of us may feel really guilty about something, and others just oh no, that's not that's not a big deal. And I think that part of that is what Paul is hinting at here too, that it's not a huge deal. It's not something that you should really fight your brother on.
Right.
I like the first verse. The first verse says, "Accept other believers who are weak in the faith, and don't argue with them about what they think is right or wrong." And when I read that text, the reason why I like it is because I hate it, because it speaks to me.
Right.
And especially at this time where we're so polarized in views, especially with this election coming up and all this stuff, right? And you, or at least let me talk about me. I know people are wrong, and it's so hard to be accepting sometimes of something that is so mistaken. And here Paul's no, accept other believers who are weak in the faith, and don't argue with them about what they think is right and wrong. And that's just that's a challenging thing for me. And I know it goes on to talk about me and other things like that, but in my current circumstance, when it comes to this, I like the fact that being being spiritually mature isn't like a precondition to have acceptance with other believers, you know. And when you think about that, it's like many times, at least in a small group setting, I want to invite all those who are going to contribute to the conversation, rather than those who are just going to stray it away. Just to give a small example. And so accepting other believers who are weak in the faith, it's like, man, no matter where they are spiritually, you know, we have to be inclusive of them. Is a big challenge to me as a pastor, as a youth and young adult person. So yeah,
it's good.
Yeah, agreed. So a few things. I think often our biggest challenge as denomination, at least within the Adventist Church, when we read texts like this, we automatically read them through our lens of interpretation, you know, through the lens of 2020, specifically, you know, the Adventist movement and the councils on diet and temperance and lifestyle. And so we automatically assume like this is a debate that Paul is having with the church about, you know, living a vegan lifestyle, plant-based, or eating meat, you know. And so included in that would be perhaps what kinds of meats as well are acceptable in a Christian diet. And so I think that the primary problem with that is that it's not taking into consideration the historical context of the text. And so Paul, it seems, is continuing to address the problems that are arising within the church in Rome because of the influx of Romans who are converted into Christianity, who were not Jewish beforehand. And so they come, of course, with the inheritance that they have had with diet and lifestyle.
Right.
And so I could imagine Jews seeing the Romans not partake in the Jewish festivals, right? Like, and the foods that often are eaten to commemorate those feast days and those celebrations, they'd be upset. They'd be a little bit bothered that they aren't respecting, in a sense, their tradition, their faith.
Right.
So Paul, it seems, is more concerned not necessarily with like the kinds of food being eaten, but what's attached, I guess, religiously to those foods. And so the Jews, they think that there's holiness that's attached to the diets that they keep through the feast days that they celebrate. And I feel like Paul is really aiming towards making the point that there's not some like kind of holiness that is attached to that. And although you can, you know, adhere to eating those foods and celebrating those days, if someone else doesn't do it, it doesn't mean that they are unholy.
Right.
You know, they're not unholy because someone like their wife, who just so happened to be menstruating that day, cooks them dinner, right? And they eat it, where, you know, in the Torah, they're not supposed to do that. But look, for the Roman, that's never been a problem. And it shouldn't be a problem now that they've converted into Christianity. So I feel like it's not necessarily like he's addressing the idea of like what kinds of foods you should eat. He's more concerned about the holiness that people attach to the food that they eat. And I think that's a problem today as well, where people will think that because they adhere to a certain diet, they are automatically elevated in some kind of holiness. Whereas like, Paul's word echoes into today as well. Like, don't play yourself thinking that you're more holy than others just because, you know, you adhere or don't adhere to a diet.
That's good.
Yeah, and I believe, to that point, a great example, Gabe, is when we went to college in Puerto Rico, and there were certain people who would say that, you know, you're not ready to be a pastor if you eat meat. And it's like, what does that have to do with
Right.
you know, God's calling upon you or upon me? And just going back to David, you know, when he gets anointed king, it wasn't because of all the things that he had done. Samuel had never seen what David had done. He had never seen David, period.
Right.
And so the only thing that made David, you know, king or anointed king was the fact that God told Samuel to do so. And so it's not what you do or the lack of things that you do that are going to end up, you know, you having this faith to accept the fact that you're a child of God. It's just simply the fact that you are because God says you are, and just having the faith to accept it.
That's good.
And I went back to Romans chapter 1 because I want to be like, yo, what is it? Because Paul always says something positive or you know, commends these people on something to whoever he writes. And so I went there, and basically the first thing that he mentions is he starts to be like, hey, I commend you on your faith, you know, that is spoken of throughout the whole world. And then in this chapter, he's like, hey, you know, all of those people that have like really weak faith, yeah, I accept them too. And so perhaps they had grown to a point where their faith, right, they consider their faith to be so strong and so well, you know, built that they perhaps created a division between those who exemplified this like great faith and those who perhaps weren't living the best of lives that exemplified the faith that they were looking for. And so it was really nice for me to see that in verse 1 and then go back to chapter 1 because of just the vast inclusivity that Paul speaks, you know, to, and the one that we're lacking so much now, not only in our country, but within our churches. You know, you have to exemplify a certain kind of faith in order to be part of, you know, certain groups in church. Not to pinpoint any ministry per se, but, you know, certain groups.
That's good. I like that. I also think what's interesting is that like the Jewish festivals often, as mentioned before, came with, you know, some kind of feast, some kind of, you know, food that you would consume, and that more often than not was some kind of meat. Some, you know, you're eating lamb or you're eating, you know, asado. You know, you're eating meat. And what's like interesting is that today we always think like, you know, oh yeah, we would imagine the dispute being the Jews telling the Romans, hey guys, you can't eat those kinds of meats. Perhaps, and I know this, you know, this is not arising from the text in black and white, but perhaps some of the contention was also that the Romans were abstaining from eating meat on those occasions. Hey, who knows? Maybe they were the vegans in this scenario. But that is something that we have to consider, that some festivals that the Jews celebrated required meat to be eaten. And it could be that the Romans were just not eating meat at all. So yeah, we should consider that.
I don't know, something I'm just thinking of, and I might be like changing the conversation completely, but I've just been thinking about, you know, like, you know, when people, you know, I like the whole idea of weak. I don't know what it was like for you guys. I know for me, like when I first like gave my life to Christ, where I was like really trying to shift my life, I would say there were a lot of things that I did that were more strict, right? You know, like I was a little bit more focused on what I ate, even more so than I am now, right? Or like I didn't listen to certain type of music, like if it sounded like music I used to listen to. Whereas now, as I've matured in my faith, I'm a little bit more willing to, you know, do certain things, right? So I think there's this thing where I've seen people like they are giving their life to Christ or they're undergoing the shift, right? And for me, I'm like, man, you're super conservative right now, right? But then they're really just trying to stay grounded, right? They recognize like where they were in this sort of weak state, and they're just trying to hold on to it. And so for me, I've thought about like, you know, there's been times where somebody's talking about, you know, something, and I'm like, man, that's not what I feel now, you know, 7 years into like my spiritual maturity, right? Like that I feel like where I was, but I have to think back to where I was 7-8 years ago and kind of be willing to journey with people. And I think like that's also part of it, right? Because I think I've watched people that this whole idea of, you know, I'm not going to eat this right now because I'm just trying to honor God. But then as you've seen them grow into their faith, they're still just as spiritual, right? They're still growing in their faith, but now maybe they eat some meat. I'm just using that as an example because that's what the text is talking about.
Yeah.
But I think there's this sort of journey that people go on just to like, you know, stay grounded early on when they recognize that they're weak, right? So that was that's just something I'm thinking about because that's something I saw in myself and I see in a lot of people, and maybe you guys see as, you know, as pastors or even as friends, right? Like this idea of people just trying to stay grounded, you know, so they're going to do something that might feel extreme or even legalistic to, you know, at this point.
I love that, Stephen. I love that you mentioned that because, you know, the other side is the fact that as you mature, it seems like from the outside looking in, right? So as Stephen matures, he's going back to the old things he used to do, you know, and it's not like that because you're going back, but with a whole different mindset.
And
so a lot of times when we see people doing things or being in places that we think as Christians they shouldn't be at, because, you know, Christ, you know, or his angels, whatever story we make up, they wouldn't go in there. And we look at that, and it's not a sense of like, he's turning back to his old ways. That's not what it's about. It's the fact that now with this new mindset, you can go and reach people and just be a fuller version of yourself, a more genuine version of yourself to your friends, to the people that you knew in those circles. And I think that's exactly what Paul does. I feel when he is when Jesus, you know, presents himself, you know, on the road to Damascus, you know, he's in bed for like, I don't know how many, it was like, I don't remember how many days. I don't remember the story exactly, but it was a few days, you know, that he was just there. And then the first people that he goes back to aren't the Gentiles. It's the Jews. And then he goes to the Gentiles, but with this whole new mindset. And I think that the church kind of is losing out on that because we feel that at some point, I'm saying we because I feel it too, at some point there is a sense of security in standing your ground, right, in those areas, saying, okay, at least I'm doing something right, you know, or that I think is right. Whereas I feel that many times God is calling us, hey, why don't you stop by a bar on a Saturday, you know, or a coffee house and have a conversation with someone, you know. The thing I like about like those, you know, small coffee houses is that whenever you come in, like there's always a, you know, if they're a good waiter, if they're a good, you know, coffee, whatever person, barista, whatever you want to call them, they're going to spark up a conversation with you, you know, because that's just, you know, that's the ambiance. That's how it is. And just to have the opportunity to talk to people, I think is kind of like part of the Sabbath is about, knowing people's story. So I definitely resonate with what you're saying there, Stephen, because we see that as some kind of like spiritual maturity, the fact that you've been rigid and you've stayed that for like so many years after you converted, and the fact that, you know, you're called into, you know, Christianity to follow Jesus isn't the fact, I'm staying rigid to this, is more like, where do I see Jesus, and let me go in those directions and be able to exemplify a genuine Christian lifestyle, which isn't one of like, purity and holiness. Those things are not based on what I do or how I behave, but more so on what Jesus has accomplished for me. That's good. And my faith in that.
Yeah. I like it. I think it's going off what you're saying. It's kind of like Paul saying throughout the letter, don't be enslaved to things again. Right. You were already, you know, caught up or connected to, you know, it's about you doing it. And then I'm bringing this gospel of this reality that it's nothing that you bring to the table. But so many times, like you guys are saying, right, you just get caught up after you accept Jesus. Like, I need to act this way. I need to do this. I can't do this. I need to eat this. I can't eat that. I can't go in there because Jesus isn't in there. Right. When in reality, Paul's saying like, look, we have this freedom and now we use this freedom for Christ. And as we've been seeing, I think for me, it's been speaking a lot, is just like how now this new freedom that I have, I don't use it for myself and to protect but I use it to reach out and love others, right? And help others. And I think this is kind of the context that Paul's operating in, right? Where he says, look, if you're doing something that's causing, and he'll talk about it a little later as we move on. If you do something that's bothering your brother, like the whole reason we're here on earth is to, we're waiting Jesus' kingdom and the final, realization of it. But you got to love your brother and sister, man. If you're doing something as a follower and you're causing them to stumble and fall, then something's up. And going back to, like you were saying, right, that first verse, I think is the idea of like, you're building up others. You're not tearing down others and saying, hey, yo, you're a vegetarian. You're weak, bro. I know my dad used to joke like that, and now he's a vegetarian, but he used to joke before in his pre-vegetarian days about like, in heaven, we're not going to eat meat. So we got to eat all the meat we can now. Right. And, you joke and you make, obviously different context of what's going on with what's there. But instead of tearing people down for what they do or don't do, right, it's building people up and helping others. Brandon had a comment a couple minutes ago. He said, wasn't there also an issue of meat being offered to idols, right, in the context there? It was at least in the church in Corinth. And so the faith issue may be more than just what is healthy, but also having the faith to know that the idols are not real. So that it doesn't matter that the food is offered to them, while others thought that one should never eat food offered to idols, right? So yeah, very good context there. We know that at least it's explicitly said in the book of Corinthians. Could be something too, right? At some point, I know the Romans were having their people offer, the citizens offer food to their gods. And so at some point, Christians had to say, do we do that? We know they're not real. Do we do it just to be okay with the community? Do we do it because, it's a faith issue? So great observation there. And then Brandon also added, social media being what it is, there are some who accuse certain, usually political leaders, of not being Christian, and others who point to Jesus' statement to judge not, lest ye also be judged. How should a Christian respond to either view? That's a very good point, right?
Wait,
I'll read
it
again.
That up for a second?
Yeah, I'll read it up. And before we answer, I do want to just move on to the next section, because I think it goes into judgment. And I think we'll table this one for just after we read this time. But yeah, the idea right at the end, just closing up this section, chapter 7, none of us lives for ourselves. At the end of the day, we live for God. Whether we live or die, we do it for God. And not just that, but I think adding, we are not islands. We live for others. What we do affects those around us. So just continue, Brandon, we'll get to your question right now, but I just want to read verses 10 to 18, because I think it really goes into this judgment idea. And he says in 10, you then, why do you judge your brother or sister, right? Kind of echoing the words of Jesus. Or why do you treat them with contempt? For we will all stand before God's judgment seat. It is written, as surely as I live, says the Lord, every knee will bow before me, every tongue will acknowledge me. So then, each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. Therefore, let us stop passing judgment on one another. Instead, make up your mind not to put any stumbling block or obstacle in the way of a brother or sister. I'm convinced, being fully persuaded in the Lord Jesus, that nothing is unclean in itself. But if anyone regards something as unclean, then for that person, it's unclean. If your brother or sister is distressed because of what you eat, you are no longer acting in love. Do not by your eating destroy someone for whom Christ died. Mercy. Therefore, do not let what you know is good be spoken of as evil. For the kingdom of God is not a matter of eating and drinking, but of righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. Because anyone who serves Christ in this way is pleasing to God and receives human approval. A lot of thoughts there. He begins with that judgment part, and I'll just bring up Brandon's question again. Should a Christian respond to either view? The view of, are holding obviously leaders accountable, and also others that say, don't judge lest you be judged, right? With the idea where if you judge, then you're going to be judged. But if you don't judge, how do we as Christians gauge that, right? Especially now, I think pitting that with the culture, with the cancel culture, right? Which I know a lot of people have different views. I think and we can talk about that too, right? But especially now in social media, the power of social media in a pandemic where, if someone is calling out Starbucks is immediately gonna like disassociate themselves from whatever people are hating on, right? And it's crazy how much pressure social media and word of mouth and this cancel culture has on people actually making decisions and saying, we're no longer partnering with this person that, you know, maybe 10 years ago said this thing or that. So how do we, you know, that's obviously two questions, but how do we respond to that, right? In terms of maybe holding people accountable as leaders, but then also the idea that we're not, you know, don't judge necessarily. You should just be loving. Also cancel culture. You know, if anybody wants to take a stab at any of that, feel free.
I'll jump in really quick. Just like kind of what I'm feeling initially is like this. Like I think for better or worse, right? As Christians, we oftentimes still, while we may say like Christ saves us, I still think we think in terms of somebody's actions, giving example as to who they are, what their relationship is, right? And so I think we're always grappling with that. And I think that's not just a Christian issue, that's also an issue in the broader world, right? So, if you voted for this, or if you did this, or you said this, then this must mean that you believe this, right? And you are this. And then I think but like that seems very simple, but then you pair that with the gospel and it kind of complicates the whole issue, right? So if we aren't defined by, you know, what we do and, you know, like this, it creates this sort of this issue. And then also this don't judge me, God judges me idea, and how quickly that can become. Because even all throughout Romans, like Paul is grappling with this, right? He doesn't just say you're free to do whatever you want to.
Right.
He also says like you are free, right? So it's like how do you balance that? And I think like I'm not really answering anything. I'm just kind of like processing it. I'm just being honest. But at the same time, like I think it's something that I think we wrestle with all across the board. You know, because I think for better or worse, Adventists and people that are not Christians still kind of say, well, if they are vegan or if they vote this way, then that means they think this or they are this, and this says something about, you know, X, Y, Z. And then so that's just kind of like what I feel, what I'm seeing right now, and how that reflects in what we're seeing now in 2020 and on social media. You know, somebody makes one post, right? Or maybe they're processing something, right? And they are just they're hoping that somebody will help them work through it. But in actuality, now they're canceled, right?
Right.
So I think you're just,
Or even if it happened, you know, and I think there's good validity, right? You know, someone says something here 5 months, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, right? That may have been homophobic, transphobic, racist. Obviously, you know, I think, we can, you know, engage in that conversation too. You know, what balance is it? You just call the person out and then hope that, you know, where do we leave room for them to grow and say, I've learned from that. I'm sorry. Because it seems a lot of cancel culture is like, it doesn't matter what you say now. It's you know, and obviously too, right, you got to give that, you know, are you sorry because you got caught, or are you actually changed, right? That's hard to gauge on social media because you're not actually having that face-to-face conversation. So
and it's like reconciling what you said then with what you're claiming to be now, right?
Right.
So, and how, like, as Christians, then, you know, that for many of us would just say, man, I found the Lord and I changed and I'm growing in my faith. Right. For other people, you know, that answer may not be satisfactory, you know?
Yeah. I think just to chime in as well, I think this issue with judgment and you know, judging others, and it can create tension based off of your understanding of what kind of judgment is happening. And so I think that for many Christians today, when they feel like let me just put it this way. Much of the judgment that Paul is referring to in his writings has to do with the final judgment that God gives at the end times, where he gives like an executive order, so to speak, determining the eternal outcome for all of human beings. And so that might be you're going to be on his left side or on his right side, you know, Matthew 25 pretty well. And so the idea of judgment is often associated with the end time, at least when Paul's writing. And I think that in this particular case, in Romans chapter 14, he's writing with that in mind, the end. He's considering, you know, hey, the final judgment that God is going to execute over the earth. And I think that we humans, specifically Christians, would do well to remember that God is the only one that has the authority and has the right to cast that kind of judgment. However, caveat. God does give us not just permission, but the responsibility to judge while we're here on earth. Now, that judgment is much different than the judgment that God executes, because the one that God executes is the one that, you know, is final, and it's the one that is upright and completely.
It's judgment versus condemnation.
Yes, his judgment is completely pure and true. And I think that many people who do wrong like to use that verse, like, judge not, you know, lest you be judged, as a defense, you know, as a defense mechanism, so that they don't have to be held accountable for their actions. And in scripture, we see the exact opposite, right? One of the first things that God influences Moses to do is to set up a system of judges, right, throughout the people of Israel, so that he can better rule over the nation. Right. I mean, it's literally one of the first things that happens. And so throughout all of the period of Israel's development as a nation, and as their growth, they are constantly being held accountable for the things that they do. And God sends prophets to do that with the leaders, the kings, the rulers. You know, if you want to look at Elijah, he came in to Ahab and to Jezebel, and Ahab's words were much like the words of the rulers today, who feel like they are being persecuted because they're being held to account. You know, Ahab told Elijah, "Oh, look, here comes the troublemaker of Israel." All he was doing was really telling him, "Hey, God's going to hold you accountable."
That's good. That's a good
things that you're doing.
That's good.
And we see that throughout the whole entire narrative of scripture. We see that in John the Baptist. We see that in Jesus. We see that in Paul as well. So yeah, this whole idea that we're not supposed to judge that's not biblical. God tells us to judge. Jesus tells his disciples, judge, but make sure that your judgment is righteous judgment. Right. We don't have the authority to condemn, as Brian said, and I think that you know, something that we have to remember always. We don't know the beginning from the end. Only God knows that. Only God can cast that final judgment, sending someone either to eternal life or you know, the exact opposite. But we do have the responsibility of judging now.
That's good. With that, I don't know if before someone else jumps in, but Brandon's just mentioned this in light of what you're saying. My response to many people has been to distinguish between judgment, like Gabe is talking about, right? The eschatological or end time final judgment of God, and discernment, which I think it's a good word. In Matthew 7, Jesus does warn about judging others because he will be judged in the same way. But later in the same chapter, he warns his listeners about false prophets and says that by their fruits you will know them. I've then paired it with Galatians, where Paul contrasts the works of the flesh with the works of the spirit. And I believe God calls us to discern the different. I'm trying to see if I can find the. Okay, here, let me see it on my phone. The difference between right and wrong, and it's not the same type of judging. Yeah, so great point, Brandon. I think summarizing what Gabe has been saying, right? Obviously, we're not the final word. Where some people in other denominations might say we are the final word. You know, if we say this person is saved and not, then we're good. But at the end of the day, we're not, you know, the final word on, like, you know, this person's gone too far. You are not worthy to be saved, right? But I think we do have a responsibility as Christians and as culture changers, as we're ushering God's kingdom in this time, to really stand up and hold people accountable, right? And I think that's what Gabe was saying, the difference between accountability and judgment. You're not saying, yeah, you're too far gone. It's like, no, I want to, you know, because of my desire to save all people, as Paul says, right? My heart's desire is for the Israelites. And I think that's what he was doing, right? He would say, you know, I'm not judging them, but I'm really calling them out and saying, look, you're not in line with what you need to be doing. So he's clearly, and even in the book of Romans, shows us what it means to call people into accountability, right? In this idea of cancel culture. And Maria I also mentioned earlier, cancel culture has existed for a long time. It's just more evident now because of social media. So the outrage on the counseling is almost laughable because it's not a new thing, especially since liberals are blamed for it when almost everyone has participated in it. And I feel like we've seen it even in church, growing up, and how we've done our sermons and our series, like we've talked about, and we've canceled denominations because they're the mark of the beast, right? Or people because they worship on Sundays, right? So we've gone about doing our own cancel culture, to the extent where, when, I don't know if how, we all went through theology, all of us did almost 7 years, right? With seminary and all, and undergrad. And it's so hard, obviously, thankfully our mind, we've experienced the kind of what Paul's talking about, the freedom, right? But it's so easy when you've been taught to cancel people, or for us as Adventists, the Catholic Church, when you meet a Catholic person, you're like, I can't associate with you because I've canceled you in my mind, right? Spiritually speaking, if that, I don't know. So yeah, I think this is a good conversation, accountability versus judgment. Anybody else? Brian, any thoughts? Stephen?
Yeah. So to the first question, the political sphere, right? Political leaders, that Stephen spoke to a little bit too. What came to my mind first was, Biden's running mate, Senator Harris. And just like the day, literally like the moment after they announced that she would be his running mate, just a bunch of articles on like what she's done and what she's saying now compared to what she's done in the past, and where she falls within that spectrum. And when you read this, you're like, man, yeah, I mean, it doesn't look too good. But honestly, Paul was killing Christians. And then he was like, oh, now I'm a Christian and I'm here to profess, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you're like, well, what are we going to do about that? Right. So it's very difficult because people are very difficult, and it's hard for you to be able to judge whether someone is actually changed or not until you see, the work that they put forth.
Right.
But my 2 cents are there in verse 7, for we don't live for ourselves or die for ourselves. And when I think of that, and, this whole judgment thing and what Gabe was mentioning, at the end of the day, what's gonna matter is whether the judging that you did was for the benefit of the community or the benefit of yourself. And what Paul is saying is like, if in the end of the day you're just benefiting yourself, that's not going to work out. That's not going to go too well for you. And at the end of that little section, it says, verse 10 says, so why do you condemn another believer? Why do you look down on another believer? And that is that's what I feel Paul is saying is the mistake in judgment, when you take upon yourself that role of condemning and looking down on someone else for not doing the things that perhaps they should be doing. But judgment isn't that. Judgment is simply part of that is like Brandon said, right? Discernment, right? And I think we need to do a little bit more of that, of a little bit more judging and less condemning. I think that will take us a long way. And if we make decisions based on what is going to benefit our community versus what's going to benefit our church, we might actually get somewhere as far as the mission that God has called us to.
Yeah. And I think, erring on the side of grace, right? I think like you were saying, perfect illustration, Paul literally killing the very people he's then hanging out with and preaching to. So if anybody was going to get canceled, it was him. That's like, yo, you literally killed my cousin. Like there's no coming back from that, right? So I think there is, and it's a difficult, I think it's a delicate, I was going to say dance, but walk, right, that you do. And I think that's why Paul is trying to, as Stephen, I think, was saying, right, throughout the book, trying to say what this balance is, right? You're wrestling every instance that you're going through. There's no like, okay, this is how you act every single time, right, with every single person. Like you have to take every situation on its own. So definitely here. And so I appreciate the conversation. Great points there. Moving into then this, I think my question is, right, as we've been seeing kind of like, a weak person is someone, I guess, weak of faith and strong. Where do you guys see yourselves, right? When you read this, I was thinking about this morning. Do you consider yourself a strong person of faith, or, you know what I'm saying? Because as you read this, usually I think we consider ourselves a strong person where we're like, and I kind of wanted to, and I don't know if you guys want to kind of contextualize this debate, right? Where for there, it would have been over what they're eating and the festival days that they're keeping or not. But for us, maybe it's to cut the conversation on mask wearing, right? Who would be the strong person and who would be the weak person? There you go, Stephen. Right. In terms of, I don't know, just to contextualize it to make it make sense in terms of the mask discussion, right? Is the strong person seems to be, according to a little commentary I read, the strong are strong because they're flexible, they're accommodating, they're capable of giving in to others, compromising, and conciliatory. So who would be strong in that situation? Someone that's saying, it's okay. You don't have you guys wear masks. I'm not going to wear my mask, but do. Or are they the weak and are the strong people the people that wear it because they're, from our perspective, they care more?
That's not faith. That's not about faith, but that's not a faith question. That's are you well equipped to make wise decisions, or are you not to just not insult anyone?
Right.
But no, I don't think that's a faith question there about the whole mask thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. I like it.
Yeah, me neither. I'm sorry. I don't want to compliment anyone that is going to put the health of someone else at risk.
Verse 7.
I
like
Verse 7,
it.
guys. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Philippians verse 7. Verse 7 in Romans 14 and Philippians chapter 2 is pretty clear on this. We don't live for ourselves.
Yeah, I think I do think it's a good analogy of how we understand freedom, right? Sorry, it's a lot of noise. But yeah, like how we understand freedom, right? Because I think a lot of people say, I'm free to kind of do whatever I want. Right? And so that's why I choose not to.
Mm-hmm.
And you're free to wear it because you choose not to, right? And I think within that conversation, right? I think it's like what we're saying, right? We don't live for ourselves. And even what we talked about in Romans 13, right? This whole idea of your neighbor. And I think as you spiritually mature, right, you're actually more in tune with what Christ wants for your life, which in turn makes you more in tune with what to help other people find a deeper connection to Christ, right? And I think it's so easy to kind of be so caught up in what, I'm free, I'm going to express my rights on my behalf versus somebody else, right? So I think a mask is a good analogy for even how we
interpret freedom.
Yeah. Definitely a good analogy.
I think that at least from the perspective of Romans, we see that I guess the benefit of the collective, like what is important to the community.
That's a good word. Yeah.
Often, not always, but often is more valuable than what is beneficial to the individual. And so Paul, throughout this whole entire letter, he is, trying to, I guess, ease the tension between the Jews and the Romans in the church, and he really wants them to be united and stop the divisions that are arising.
That's good.
And so this whole idea of individualism and my personal freedom to do whatever I want often is a deterrent to unity and to the whole community being blessed. And so Paul often encourages the church to put aside this pursuit of individual freedom, or if however you want to label it, desire, ambition, and really consider the community at large.
That's good.
What is going to be valuable to them? What is going to bless them? And
that's a good word.
That's it.
That's a good word. Yeah.
So, quick question, Seba. What was your question to us again about what our personal what?
Yeah, I appreciate, and I'll give my thoughts, and then the question was, where do you guys see? And then I just added a caveat of hey, does this could this connect with the mask and not man? But when you read this, do you consider yourself to be a strong person of faith or a weak person of faith? Before you say that, let me just say my 2 cents, right? So I think no, I agree with you guys 100%. I think. And that's something that I've really seen here, right? Like, especially going off of what Gabe was saying, the freedom that Paul is talking about, and just the emphasis. And that's been something I've been trying to preach to my church over the last couple of weeks, like we no longer live for ourselves, right? Like it's not about you and what you want. You know, as we've been looking at, you know, the practical side of this, right? From chapters 12, 13. I mean, even the way you, like I love that chapter 13 that we were talking, you know, the way you vote now has to be for others. It's not just about your own interest, right? Paul says, you know, when he says, you know, it's no longer you who live, but Christ who lives in you. And how did Jesus live? He didn't live for himself. He came and lived for the benefit of everyone else, right? And obviously the Bible culture is operating in the one, like Gabe was saying, in the world of it's about the community and what brings, you know, the most benefit to the group, right? To the Jesus group, not just to you. And this is clearly shown here where Paul says, look, and I don't know, maybe that's a question for you guys. Is there anything you've wanted to do or get or try, but you haven't because you think that you would cause someone to stumble? Maybe you don't want to talk about it. It's fine, you know, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure there's things that, okay, for one thing, right? I've always had a fascination. I don't know if I should say actually, but with tattoos, right? I have a lot of friends that got tattoos.
I knew it.
for some reason, you know, but I know my mom would, you know, meatatarians, you know, but it's not something that I really, and I don't think it's 100%, you know, accurate to that really, because that's not something I crave every day. Like I want to get a tattoo, but I know it's something that if I got and they saw, oh, Pastor Sebastian has a tattoo, then that might open the door for, you know, that might be an extreme analogy, right? But it's something that I've always like, oh, it'd be cool to get, you know, even if it says grace or Jesus or saved, right? A cross or something. I was like, that'd be cool to always be reminded. But it's something that I've taken into, you know, SDA for life, right? Ellen White, E.G. White, right? It's something that I've really, that's something that I've kind of used to practically apply this principle of like, hey, look, even though for me, I could get it and I might be okay with it. I might feel guilty because people would be judging and saying, hey, how do you have, but it's not something I'm going to get because I don't want to cause more harm than good. Even though for me, it'd be like, oh, that's cool. That's cool. Right. So that's where my question goes to you guys. You know, do you, when you guys read through this, and I think most people consider themselves part of the strong group, right? Most of them would be like, I'm the one, you know, but I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I can answer that, at least like with me. One of the things that I can compare this to my own journey is, you know, the way I dress to church specifically. I would rather show up in jeans, Converse, and you know, a t-shirt. I'd rather show up more casual than formal.
Agreed.
And so I think that for many people, especially considering their culture, they think that, you know, you have to show up to church in, you know, your I guess the term would be Sunday best, or for us, you know, your Sabbath best. You know, if you have access to a shirt and tie and to a suit, that is the proper attire. And so for some people, I understand that culturally, that's the norm. That's what is expected of you, especially if you're a pastor. Now, I am willing to be flexible in that regard. You know, as much as I don't like wearing suits all the time, I will do so, especially considering the, you know, the context. Now, do I bend the rules a little bit every now and then? Yes, I do so. And I will use my pastor card to get away with it as well.
It's like, did you know where ties come from? That's where they used to hang people. Like, whoa!
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's it's a silk necklace. I don't wear silk necklaces.
That's funny.
But yeah, I think that's probably the most I can compare this to. This dress. If I know someone's gonna get offended by how I'm dressed, or they're gonna, you know, act a fool because pastor's wearing sneakers in the church, then I'll, you know, not do that.
Yeah. It's a good thought.
Yeah, I think, you know, me too, being in a situation where it's a little bit older, more traditional, right? I think I've had to, like Sabbath, you know, I want to wear something a particular way or do whatever. But there's other situations where, you know, I'm not going to be in a suit and tie and I'm with a bunch of young people, right? Or people that maybe aren't of the same faith as me, or maybe on a journey. And so I think, I mean, there's like similar to Gabe, like there's situations when even if I'm, you know, encountering an older person and they see me, like they're like, oh, pastor, you got the casual thing going, you know, and it's like and it is throwing them off. But I have to explain, like, hey, like I was just with X, Y, and Z, or I'm doing this because I was, I'm focused on this, I'm, in this area. And then also too, when it comes to interacting with people, right? Understanding, I guess people talk about like reading the room, right? Like the expectation of what is it going to be like, right? So reading the room and knowing like, okay, I'm going to go in this situation where people are going to be dressed this way. And so let me, instead of coming in a suit or coming in, dressed like how I am now, I'm not going to make it a big deal. I'm not going to make it a reason that's going to divert attention from where it should be. And I think that, I guess that's one thing we're talking about that. And then another thing maybe would even be, I'll just be honest too, when it comes to like,
let's go.
What's the right word? Like code switching, right? Like when I'm in a church situation, like I find myself talking different versus when I'm with, my friend, and it's not so much language, or cursing, whatever. It's just how I talk, right? Intonation. It's, certain slang that I'll use versus when I'm in a church situation where I know if they hear me using certain words, or they hear me talking a particular way, that it's gonna throw them off. Right? So because like this is for them, there's this sort of spiritual attachment. But in the process, I'm also trying to help them understand that there are moments when they're going to encounter somebody who doesn't talk like them or doesn't do what they do. And so I guess like in my situation, it's trying to gauge that difference, right? Trying to pull and that pendulum for older people, right? And or even for people that are younger, right? To understand like, hey, we need to have some grace in this. Everybody's on their own.
Right.
Good. And I think it's understanding that. So that's a few of the things. I mean, there's more, and you do want to talk about tats, like, or I want to tat, but at the same time, it's like understanding what that could represent for other people, right? For other people, like, oh, he has that. That's cool. Like, there's a space for that. But in another situation, it would be like, oh my gosh, like, if this spiritual person has this, then what does that mean? Like,
right.
Yeah. What is it saying, right? It's a journey, and it's a push.
It is, yeah.
Just
pendulum swing.
I'm gonna get a tattoo right here on my chest of the 10 Commandments.
That's it, man. Come on.
Jeremiah tells us that.
I've read it. What is that? Isaiah says, "I've engraved your name on my hand," or
in
the palm of my hand. Yeah, Brian. What's
make sure they put it on like font like 72, so it takes up.
The whole entire
thou, just a big thou.
Thou shalt.
You could always get a tattoo here, right? And let your beard grow over it, and then you'll be fine.
That's true. Yeah.
And every time you scratch your beard, you're like, oh, you'll be reminded. No, I'm kidding. All right. For me, do I consider myself strong in the faith? I want to say no. Like I struggle just like anyone else. And there are certain things that I felt guilty about trying. I'm like, oh man, should I try? No, I shouldn't try this. And then trying like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't have done that. For sure. I think that that what's helped me is when other people see the faith that I have, not necessarily when I see it myself. And so when someone else comes up and says like, yo, this, what you did here was a step of faith, and I didn't see it that way, but someone else saw it and was like, man, that kid has faith.
Wow.
I'm like, oh snap. Okay. And so I think that at least I don't define myself as a person with like an enormous amounts of like faith and being all strong and all this stuff. But I do like to go with, the motion, right? So God's motion. So like where he kind of like leads me, that's where I will kind of go, and whatever problems are set before me, I'll accept it, and I'll go with that. But as far as like the faith, like in this chapter about judging others and stuff like that, I gotta say that I do have these thoughts of like, yo, what the heck are you doing? Like you know better, and if you keep doing that, this is what's gonna happen to you. Those are thoughts that are going on in my mind. I don't express them because I know that will cause people to stumble and be like, wow, I'm not coming back here. And so just being able to have that conflict, in my mind or in my heart, of what is right and what is wrong, and then instead of speaking what is right and what is wrong, being able to go ahead and act, and then be being able to act in a way that embraces people and accepts them, as
right.
verse 1 says. And so that's the tough part, because typically, you know, what your heart is full of, that's what's going to, you know, spew out of your mouth, and definitely your actions. And so just to be able to constantly be humble enough to be like, yo, God, you need to change this about me, is definitely the way to go. I don't think that speaks of like a strong faith. I think it just speaks of, you know, trusting God to kind of do that for you.
Yeah.
So those are my two. At least me personally, I'm not like, oh, I'm not like strong in the faith because I read 8 chapters of the Bible every morning. I'm just like, I consider myself good because, you know, whenever a circumstance happens, I go along with what I think God would want me to do.
Yeah,
that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I love that. And Brian, I love how you pointed out how being strong in the faith has less to do with Bible knowledge and more to do with how you relate to other people.
Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, and I think that's something to emphasize.
I'll write that down. Less of Bible knowledge and more of how you treat others. That's great.
The word was relate, so gosh. Quote right, man. If you're going to quote.
Less of Bible and more of how you relate to others.
You can edit it a little bit.
You sound like the ESV version.
Yo, that's good. I like that.
Living translation.
I had Maria had actually shared. She shared 2 stories here. But one, you know, obviously she says there's this funny story in her honeymoon. They were in Cancun. Husband showed up to the church on Sabbath in his suit and tie. The people there asked him immediately if he was preaching that day because it was so hot and no one else was wearing a suit and tie. So that's true, right? Very cultural how we've just adopted this, at least in our church, that the proper attire, at least for men, is a suit and tie. No matter where you are in the world, suit and tie, which doesn't make sense in a lot of places in the world. And another story, she says, a story from Cancun. Another year, a whole family visit again. My sister was wearing a sleeveless dress and forgot her sweater at the hotel. Volunteered to play the piano since there was no pianist. Lady immediately came up, you can just imagine it, and told her she couldn't play the piano dressed like that. I guess she was restricted. I don't know. Why can't you play it like that? They brought a shawl for her to wear. My sister was upset, especially because she said the same lady had a ton of makeup. I couldn't help but laugh at the whole situation. So very true. A lot of things like that. I mean, we've talked about it too. I remember, you know, Steven and I went to Southern. A lot of vegans or vegetarians there that eat daily, you know, Little Debbie's. That was always a running joke, right? Little Debbie, a lot of cake. And so you can be the greatest vegetarian and vegan, but eat a whole box of zebra cakes. And so where's the balance, right? You're not really living out completely. Yeah. So this lady wearing a ton of makeup coming to say that's not appropriate. You're just like,
yeah,
who dressed you up in the morning? Yeah.
I feel like if I was a vegan, I would totally just be making up for not eating meat by indulging in sweets. I have the biggest sweet tooth, so
yeah, that bitterness built up from
from not being able to taste them.
I'm kidding, Steven. I'm kidding.
No, I mean, we got Impossible Whoppers now, bro. We got
those are good.
It's a different world now. It's a different game now, man.
But they aren't necessarily healthier, So for me, I try to gauge, like, what is it? Yeah, but that's like a personal thing for me. Whereas I think other people that are like on a different, like, for them, it's trying to get over, meat, right?
Unrelated now. Steven, have you ever tried making like your own burger, like with beans and stuff like that?
Yeah. Like, I don't do it often. I get lazy sometimes.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a lot of work.
Sounds like, it does.
It's like a lot of work. It's not cool. Because I follow like a ton of people that are like vegan recipes, like all these vegan recipes on Instagram and stuff.
Yeah.
But I have to try to find that's relatively easy to make, like common ingredients versus like cacao powder from this store. I'm like, man, I can't find that in where I live either.
Yeah. One thing that we do here, most of my family is vegetarian. I think it's only me and my mother that actually eat meat. But when we do have like I don't know, cookouts, whatever, we crank up the grill and we throw Impossible burgers on them. Now I'll eat like 2 or 3 of those bad boys. Those things are good. Like low key, like I'm telling you, Brian, I know,
I've tried Impossible Burgers. They're
okay. Have you
He
tried
said-
them on the grill as well? Like where you make it at
He
home
said they're
yourself?
impossible.
I've made
They're
it at
impossible
home.
to eat.
I haven't
Okay.
made them on grill, but
They're
I
impossible
make
to
them
eat.
on the
Yeah,
skillet.
they're
the one from-
impossible not to eat. Those things are so
They're
good.
good. They're good. They're good.
Yeah.
Low
I mean,
key,
of
the one
course,
from-
I prefer, beef any day. If you're gonna give me a beef burger or Impossible Burger,
Uh-oh.
I'll take the beef.
Uh-oh.
But I will say, the Impossible Burgers
It's a
are
close,
pretty darn good.
close
Yeah.
fourth.
It's a close fit. Yeah.
What were you saying, Steven?
No, I said like low key, like the one from Burger King's not that good. Like there's a reason why it's that cheap. Like you have to go where it's made better. Or, like honestly, I've had it better. Like at home, I had my own stuff.
Absolutely.
The one from Burger, it's like dry and
Yeah.
all that. But I think
No
Absolutely.
sazon, no
Sure.
oil. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna keep going. We're gonna finish real quick. Last
Oh, we
verse.
still have more.
We have the last chapter. Let us therefore make every effort to do what leads to peace and to mutual edification. Do not destroy the work of God for the sake of food.
Mm.
All food is clean. You heard that? But it is wrong. No, I'm kidding. I'm on the verge of vegetarianism too, man. Chantal's vegan, so I'm just pulling your leg, Stephen. All food is clean, but it is wrong for a person to eat anything that causes someone else to stumble. It's better not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything else that will cause your brother or sister to fall, right? So abstain for the account of others. So whatever you believe about these things, keep between yourself and God. Don't be posting. How many people have you met, like, hey, yeah, I hate vegetarians. Yeah. Or the other way too, right? Vegetarians are overrated. All they eat is plants and leaves. And
so many groups I've been invited to about healthy eating. It's like, man, do I look that bad? Like that? Do I need to be part of all these groups?
And it says, blessed is the one who does not condemn himself by what he approves. Which I thought that's something I would get. Blessed is the one who does not condemn himself by what he approves. But whoever has doubts is condemned if they eat, because their eating is not from faith, and everything that does not come from faith is sin. So again, just kind of recapping what we've been talking about, right? Paul is just, you don't live, you're not an island. You live for others. Other people are watching you. If you're going to cause your brother or sister to stumble for any reason, stop doing that. But at the same time, don't stop if it's good, right? If it's bringing peace and good and mutual edification, keep doing it. But obviously, thinking of others more than yourself. So very good. All right. Big takeaway for this conversation. Big takeaway. Any thoughts here?
Yeah, I think that, again, just to reiterate what Paul's concerned about, I don't think he's necessarily giving a prescription as to what kind of meat could be eating. I don't think that he has that in mind. Pretty sure the Jews and the new converts are aware of the Levitical laws concerning clean and unclean meats. What I do think he is trying to speak to is just the idea of holiness attached to diet and lifestyle. And I love how Paul is clear that, what makes us strong in the faith is not what goes into the body, but what comes out of the body and how you treat your neighbor. So yeah, that's my big takeaway.
That's good.
I guess my big takeaway is verse 1 and verse 7. I think that applies to everyone, no matter, whether you're Christian or not. That's the best way to move forward. And yeah, just I think it challenges me personally to be more accepting and to not make how well off you are spiritually and what you show on the outside to determine whether I want to include you as part of my inner circle. And I think that that's what Paul is talking about partly here is like, hey, no matter where you are in your faith, we're a community of people, and that's how we should live. And verse 7, definitely, like you were saying, you're not an island. So what it comes down to is what I'm doing, what I'm saying, how I'm acting, what I'm voting, what I'm standing up for, the content that I'm producing, whatever it is that I'm creating, anything really. is it for self or is it for others? And yeah, that's a huge challenge, and it takes more work for you to have others in mind as you do things rather than just yourself. And so that's kind of like the task at hand, and what I feel God is kind of giving me as a big takeaway this morning.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's kind of like faith is both personal and communal, right? I think it's like that there's a, because in verse 22, it says the faith that you have keep between yourself and God, right? So there's this element of, it's still necessary to really be focused and build your personal connection. But then throughout the chapter, you talk about, hey, as a result of that, keep in mind your community, right? And I think that oftentimes it may look different in a certain situation, right? It's not like a clear cut, this is the way to be around everybody, right? There's this situation. And I think Paul says your faith is still at the forefront. But what that means by your faith being at the forefront is as a result of that, you're thinking about those in your community, you're thinking about those who you're with. So I guess for me, it's just like constantly this personal and communal element of my faith is so important to keep in mind, keep at the forefront, whether that's food, whether that's dress, whether that's, how I talk or whatever, like all these different things that are talked about. And then also how those things aren't indicative of how much faith I have, right? It's not in that, I think that's the mistake that we make, right? Like, oh, I'm vegan, so therefore I'm healthier and holier, right? But that's not what it means. It's just it's an expression of your faith journey with God. And then now, how does that affect your community, right? What are you doing? How is that impacting your community as you do that?
Right.
And freedom is not just for yourself. Freedom is also to free others on their share. So those are that's my takeaway.
I love it. Yeah, I think that goes along. My takeaway goes with what Stephen's saying, right? That you don't live for yourself. And especially once you find this freedom in Christ, it's just like, I'm no longer looking at what benefits me the most, but what I can do to benefit others. And so at the same time, I want my witness in my community to be the one that shows that I care for others, right? And so going to the mass conversation, right? As a Christian, I might, you might be, it's not real, whatever, but what kind of witness are you showing to your testimony? Are you showing that you actually care about the needs and life of other, or are you just saying, I don't really care. It's just about what I want to do and my freedom. It's about my life, my rights and whatnot. So good thoughts to think about. Thank you guys for participating. Maria and Brandon, as always, appreciate your insight, your comments, your stories, your questions. And so question for let you know for next time, we're looking at Leviticus. We're going to jump to the book of Leviticus. Brian's like, what? So we're going to talk about Leviticus, so we're talking about what to eat or not. We're going to talk about the Levitical laws and how they apply. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. We're looking at what books to move on to. This is a joke. We're not going to go to Leviticus. That would probably be crazy. How many chapters? 31 chapters in Leviticus, something like that. That'd be crazy.
Brian is so honest.
Brian's like 27 chapters of Leviticus. No, we're not going to do that. But yeah, we're going to move on.
Numbers.
The book of Numbers, yeah. We got probably one more chapter. I think we're gonna do 15 and 16 next week together. And as we move on, Brandon, that sums up what Brian was feeling. So yeah, if you guys have any thoughts, any books, I think James is a good book. Obviously, we can stick with the New Testament and see how that practically looks like today. But we appreciate you all tuning in. Brian, Gabe, Stephen, thank you for the conversation. Always a pleasure. Shout out to Joe, wherever he's at, traveling the world and saving lives. Appreciate you and love you, Joe. But yeah, again, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you next week, Fridays at 10 a.m. or 10:30. We might end up at some point doing a Vespers.
Yeah, it should be Bible and brunch.
Bible and brunch. Yeah, that's true. Brunky. We'll just do Bible on Fridays because we don't know what time. Just be on the lookout for when we go live.
Surprise.
Yeah.
So yeah, make sure to subscribe, follow me on Facebook. Give me more likes. I need to get it to 1,000 followers. So once put
your handles on there, bro.
Yeah. We're actually gonna plug in Las Doñas Hablan again on Instagram. They released their first video last week. I think they're releasing another one
This week
or next week, I'm not sure. And so great contact. They're talking about what it's like to be a pastor's wife and kind of the stereotypes and the struggles and the pressures. And that's what they did on their first episode, and a lot of great conversation. So check them out on Instagram, follow them, like them. And that'll give us a lot of good things at home too, since we live with Las Doñas, with each one. But appreciate you guys. Yeah, smash that. The smash was always the word that smash that smash that like, man.
Damn.
And then Maria, thank you for tuning in with them too. There,
just one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead, bro.
Just pray for a win today in Barcelona.
Amen.
Amen. That's it.
We need it.
So you're one of those weak faith people.
Yeah. I know Messi's gonna come through. Yeah.
The Messi show.
Pray for Barca. Yeah, that's good, man. That's gonna be at 3 today Eastern.
3:00. You want to catch the pregame 2:30. Make sure you get all that down.
Yeah. Pray for Messi. Pray for Barcelona. I hope they have the good game today. So if not, tomorrow's gonna be rough. Sabbath is gonna be a crying one. But
I know.
But we'll see. All right, yo. Thank you guys again. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.
Ciao.